Mesdames, Messieurs, nous voici à ce panel numéro 3, la recherche face à la...
Ladies and gentlemen, we are now in panel 3, research in the face of COVID-19 with Professor Souleymane MBOUP, the Director General of the Institute of Research Health and Surveillance in Epidemiology, and Professor Toumani, CORRAH, the African Executive Director on Research, Excellence Fund, London, Gambia, and the United States. Professor Souleymane MBOUP, you have the floor.
Bonjour tout le monde.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone.
Permettez-moi d'abord de remercier
first of all to start by thanking the organizers of this
excellent forum.
Excellent forum.
Insister
I would like to insist
de pouvoir
oui. I cannot hear the speaker. Professor Souleymane, your camera is not on. Kindly turn on your camera. Thank you very much.
C'est bloqué.
It's blocked.
C'est bloqué de votre côté.
It's blocked on your side, says Professor Souleymane.
C'est à votre niveau que c'est bloqué. Hein?
It's at your level that the camera is blocked. I cannot activate it from my own side.
Sinon, Toumani, tu peux prendre le relais le temps que le problème de la caméra se règle.
Professor Toumani, you can take over while we wait for the...
Thank you very much. Today we're looking into the interesting topics of bioethics and ethics. Just as a brief reminder and brief introduction, we're all aware that there are 70 million cases of COVID-19 worldwide. And amongst these, 1.5 million have since died. It is better for Africa, where to date, there are only 2 million cases with 55,000 deaths. Ethics reigns supreme these days, particularly for COVID-19. For governments, for populations, but particularly so for doctors who are in an ethical dilemma over resource issues, who to treat and not to treat, when and how to withdraw treatment, and more importantly, not the least, maintaining essential services. Today, we are very privileged to have a distinguished list of panelists, and I'm going to ask the first panelist a question. The first panelist is Professor Lukas K. SOSOE, who is a professor at the University of Luxembourg. Professor SOSOE, since Nuremberg, two concepts have become essential in the field of research. First, it was about ethics, and then much later about bioethics. How can these two notions help us in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic to overcome the multiple challenges and dilemmas on the medical, political, and social level? You have up to 10 minutes. Thank you. Professor SOSOE? Professor SOSOE, you're on mute.
Yes.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Yes, good. I thank you very much for the presentation and for giving me 10 minutes, because with 5 minutes, I was it was very short to say everything in 5 minutes. So now let me change into French, because I've been asked to speak French. So, j'aimerais d'abord remercier les organisateurs de ce colloque qui m'ont invité à prendre la parole dans ce forum. C'est avec une très grande humilité que j'accepte l'invitation de participer à cet événement qui se déroule en sol africain et me rapproche de mon pays natal, le Ghana. Donc, la question à laquelle je suis invité à répondre est d'une grande complexité. Elle comprend trois dimensions. Une dimension historique, une dimension systématique et une dimension stratégique.
and strategic.
Elle peut donner lieu aux craintes qu'on a habituées.
It may lead to the fears.
Elle peut donner lieu à des craintes
It
qu'on
may
a
lead to the
habituellement
fears which we
quand on
always
pose une
have
question à un
when a question
philosophe
is
et
asked
qui
to
consiste
a
à demander
philosopher and
un
which
billet de
consists
métro et à recevoir un
asking
ticket pour un voyage
metro ticket
intergalactique. Je
or
ne
a
vais pas
ticket
essayer
for
de
the
faire ce grand tour
galaxies.
sur ce problème déjà
I don't
délicat,
really want to
mais je
go
vais
into all of that
plutôt
because that's
essayer de
already delicate
localiser
enough, but
trois
I'll try as
stations
much as
qui me
possible
semblent
to
assez
localize
importantes.
three
Ces trois
stations which I believe
stations
are
sont
very
les trois
important. And these
dimensions
three
que j'ai
stations are
déjà
the three
annoncées, à savoir
dimensions which I've
dimension
already
historique.
announced, notably the
Cette dimension
historical.
historique, à cause des nombreuses
Now, this
évocations de
historical
Nuremberg
dimension,
et
because
dans
of
les
the
rencontres mondiales sur
Nuremberg
l'éthique et la bioéthique,
trials
pour
and the
motiver
world
et
meetings in
soutenir
ethic and
la prise de
bioethics,
conscience des chercheurs.
it
Mais
indeed
à
helps
Nuremberg,
at
nous pouvons aussi ajouter
informing
plus
researchers
proche de nous les
in the
expériences
field
et
of ethics,
recherches
but quite
qui
close
ont
to
été
us.
faites sur les Noirs aux
We
États-Unis,
look at
notamment à
research which has
l'université
been carried out on
Tuskegee.
blacks in the United
Et
States,
pour ne
notably
prendre qu'un
University of
exemple, mais il y en avait
Cassidy,
beaucoup
and
d'autres.
by way of
On
example,
comprend
and
que la
there are
bioéthique
many
en tant que
others, we
discipline
understand
est
that
vue d'abord le jour
bioethics
en
as a
Amérique du Nord,
discipline came to
notamment
light in North America,
en Amérique du Nord,
notably
et
in
surtout
North
a
America,
eu
notably
un lien avec le mouvement des droits
it was
civils et le
related
mouvement
to
des
the
contestations de
civil rights
l'autorité.
movement
La question qui
and
m'a été posée est également
opposition groups which are fighting
systématique
against
car
authority.
elle exige la
There's
mise en
also the
relation du
systematic
discours
aspect,
bioéthique avec ses
because
effets
there's
sur la
bioethics
pandémie en
and its
cours.
effects on
Elle n'est pas
the
terminée, cette
current
pandémie,
pandemic.
et nous
And
sommes
this
appelés
pandemic has
déjà
not
à voir
ended,
comment la
and we
bioéthique
are already
peut
called
répondre
upon
à
to
des
see how
enjeux
bioethics
multiples, voire des
deals with the
dilemmes sur le plan
multiple
médical,
stakes, or even the
politique et
dilemma in
social.
the medical,
Elle
political,
est
and
en fait
social spheres.
stratégique
And
car
it is
elle
finally
exige la mise
strategic
en relation du discours
because it
bioéthique
requires
avec les
the
effets d'une pandémie,
relationship between
c'est-à-dire elle
bioethics
exige
and
plutôt,
the pandemic,
après la mise
and
en
we
relation
have to
du discours
say
bioéthique à une
that after
réflexion qui passe à
bioethics, we have to
l'action.
reflect
Il passe à
and move into
l'action
action.
bioéthique pouvant
And
demeurer
it has to be
tout à
bioethic
fait
action,
ineffective si après la réflexion
and it will
bioéthique,
be
on ne passe
ineffective
pas à
if
des
there is
actions
no bioethic
concrètes.
reflection,
Mais comme je n'ai que 10
which
minutes, je vais
would lead
passer
to
très
concrete action.
rapidement
But since I'll
au
have only 10
développement de
minutes
ce
to speak,
problème
I'd like to
qui me
move
semble
to the
plus
development of
global,
this
mais
problem,
qui
which
touche
I
aussi
believe is
l'Afrique en
more
particulier.
global and also
Je dirais
concerns
que
Africa in
pour parler
particular.
du
I would
COVID en
say
général,
that to talk about
elle
COVID
a
in general,
révélé avant tout
it
la
has
fragilité des
revealed
liens
above all the
sociaux et
fragility of
politiques faite
socio-political
de
links,
méfiance d'un grand nombre de
and
citoyens
many other
vis-à-vis de
people
leurs
become
dirigeants.
more careful
Donc la
when they deal with their
désinformation
leaders.
constante
So there's
et soutenue
misinformation,
a
constant
alimenté
misinformation,
une certaine méfiance et creusé
which has
davantage le
led
fossé entre gouvernants et gouvernés.
carefulness. And
Donc c'est une des toutes
that's the
premières
relationship now
révélations de
between the
cette
governed
pandémie.
and the
Deuxièmement,
governor and the
la
governed. So there's
pandémie a
suspicion in the
accentué une
relationship. Secondly,
réaction
the pandemic
endémique habituelle
heightened
au milieu
the
universitaire et
nature of a
intellectuel
pandemic
qui
in the
consiste à
university milieu
polémiquer
and in
contre
the
l'État
intellectual
ou
milieu.
les gouvernements
And there are
et
polemics
appliquer un
against the
discours
state
de
or the
soupçon
government,
systématique
and
contre les autorités politiques.
systematic
Or, pour peu que l'on réfléchisse, que l'on soit
suspicion
chercheur
against
ou
political
universitaire,
leaders. Now,
la pandémie se
for a
révèle être une
university
sorte
lecturer or a
de
researcher,
décision
the
sous incertitude.
pandemic should be
Beaucoup de gouvernements devaient décider sous
which would
incertitude.
lead to
D'abord, une
incertitude. In other
incertitude
words,
qui concerne la
there's a lot of
non-connaissance suffisante
uncertainty.
du
There's a lack of
virus.
knowledge
Et deuxièmement, il faut prendre
of
des
this
décisions très
virus, and
rapidement parce qu'on ne peut pas
secondly,
attendre toutes
the
les
decision should be
informations de
made very
recherche
quickly because you
avant
don't
de
have to
prendre ces
wait for all
décisions-là.
the necessary research
Mais dans les
information to
milieux
be ready
universitaires, on
before
n'a
you
pas eu
make
beaucoup de
decisions on
compréhension
the virus.
pour
But in the
ces
university, we don't
hésitations
have
des
a good
gouvernements
understanding
qui attendaient les informations
to
des
understand this
véritables pouvoirs
hesitation
qui se
by
sont constitués dans
governments,
cette pandémie et qui étaient les
because they
pouvoirs
are indeed
de
the
la
real
médecine,
powers,
des chercheurs en
and the real
médecine et des
powers
médecins,
should
des
be
gens sur le terrain.
medicine and
Il faut
researchers who are
ajouter
already on
à
the
cette
ground working on the
désinformation
pandemic.
provenant
To
de
add to all
certains
this
groupements
information
politiques, à cette
from some political
désinformation
groups,
et cette attitude intellectuelle, des désinformations mouvements politiques ou
misinformation
autres qui adoptent une attitude de déni de la pandémie
or others
et
who try to
surtout
deny the
un
existence of
déni
this
qui a
pandemic,
semé le trouble
and
dans l'esprit de beaucoup
this
de
has
citoyens
led to a lot
et
of problems in the minds of
accentué
many
leur
citizens
désorientation.
and
Donc le
heightened
COVID-19 a
their
déclenché
confusion.
une avalanche
So
de
COVID-19 has indeed
production
led
et
to
d'analyse des théories
a
politiques,
lot of
du moins dans les
production and
universités,
analysis of
qui a
theories,
conduit
at
le
least
plus
in
souvent
universities,
à leur
which has
relativisation
often
face à
led
la question de savoir
to
si le programme des théories politiques
to make it
et l'image qu'elles
relative, to see
convoitent
whether
de la société
political
du vivre
theories
ensemble
and the
étaient
image of the
à même de
society
répondre aux défis du
really
COVID-19.
meet
Je veux
the
dire par là
challenges
que quand on
caused by
voit la production
COVID-19.
de
I would want
théories
to say that
politiques
when we look at the
qui a été faite en
political
si peu de
theories
temps,
which
on se
have stemmed
demande
up within a
si
very
la
short
pandémie
period
n'a
of
pas
time,
provoqué
we
une
really
sorte de
wonder
remise
whether
en
this
cause
pandemic has not led to a
depuis les
situation
sciences
where we
politiques jusqu'à la sociologie
question
politique
science,
des théories
political science
habituelles. Et c'est ce que
and theoretical
c'est
sciences.
ce qui ressort de
These
ces
are
littératures. Cette
traditional
avalanche de
theories.
production en
this
elle-même positive,
massive production, which
parce
in
qu'elle
itself is
traduisait
positive,
l'engagement des
because
chercheurs
it translates
dans
the
cette
commitment
lutte,
of
dans cette
researchers in this fight,
mobilisation contre la
in this
pandémie, a
mobilization
ouvert les
against the
yeux sur la
pandemic,
nature des régimes
opened the
politiques.
eyes of people
Et ça aussi, c'est
to
un
the
phénomène très
nature of
important.
political regimes. And this is a
D'abord,
very important
elle a ouvert
phenomenon
les yeux sur la
because, first of all,
diversité
it
de leurs
opened the
réactions.
eyes of citizens
Les
on
réactions à la
the reactions
pandémie,
of governments,
donc
their reaction
les
to the pandemic.
gouvernements peuvent être se diviser au moins en trois parties.
Governments
La
could
première
be
partie, c'est la réaction des régimes
broken
autoritaires.
down to three
On a
parts.
mis les
We have
populations, on a
authoritarian
enfermé les
regimes.
populations et on les
Locked
sent
up
passer
the
par
people
une
in their
information systématique.
homes and
Deuxièmement,
they not really
c'est
follow any systematic
l'attitude des
information.
régimes qui
Secondly,
ont
there's
adopté
an attitude of
une sorte de
regimes
laisser-faire,
which
en
adopted
pensant
some
par
sort of
exemple qu'il y aurait une
laissez-faire,
immunité populaire en quelque sorte,
believing that there
et
is
ceux
popular
qui ont réagi au
immunity,
moins
and
démocratiquement en s'appuyant sur
they
des
acted
procédures
democratically
parlementaires,
by
mais
relying
quelquefois
on
étaient
parliamentary
aussi
procedure, but
menés
at times
à prendre des décisions
they
qui
were also
ressemblaient
led to
plutôt
take
à des
decisions
executive
which
orders,
looked
c'est-à-dire
rather
à des décrets,
like
parce qu'il fallait
executive
réagir
orders, in other words,
très rapidement
decrees,
et on
because
ne
they
pouvait pas
had to
attendre les
react
procédures
very quickly, and you
parlementaires
cannot wait for the
habituelles.
entire
Quant
procedure
à l'Afrique,
of the parliament
ce qui
to
m'a
go through.
surpris,
As for
c'est
Africa, what
plutôt deux
surprised
choses
me
fondamentales.
is two
J'ai
fundamental
l'impression que
things. I have the impression
parmi toutes les
that
réactions,
amongst all the
surtout
reactions
des réactions des régimes politiques qui quelquefois
of
étaient
political
violentes,
regimes, which at
on
times
peut
were
remarquer
violent,
quelque chose qui revient souvent dans
one
les
could
discours
notice
africains,
something which
qui est la
keeps coming up in the
politisation
speeches made by
culturelle
African leaders.
d'événements
That's the
importants. Qu'est-ce
cultural
que je veux dire par là?
politicization
La
of this
pandémie,
event. What
la
do I mean
pire
by
des
that?
choses qu'on
The
peut faire
pandemic,
dans cette
the
situation de
worst that
pandémie
may
est de la
occur in
politiser.
this situation of the pandemic
Or,
is to
dans
turn
certains
it to a
discours
political
africains, ce qui
weapon.
m'avait
But in
paru
some African
assez
species, it
revenir
appeared to me
constamment, c'est
that
la politisation
constantly
culturelle, l'insistance
it was
sur la
politicized quite
pharmacopée
often
africaine comme si
on
elle
the African
seule
traditional
était la solution et comme si
medicine being the
on ne
solution,
pouvait
as
pas,
if
tout en essayant de reconnaître les vertus de
admitting
cette
that African
pharmacopée,
traditional medicine
essayer de
has
faire des analyses, de
virtues,
faire la
we
recherche
could
et
also
voir
try to
s'il n'y a pas dans ces
analyze
plantes, ou
and
bien s'il y a
see
dans ces
whether
plantes
in these
vraiment des
plants
vertus curatives, ou bien s'il
there
n'y
are
a pas des
curative
facteurs multiples, s'il n'y
medicines,
a pas une situation multifactorielle qui a fait que
and
la
whether there
situation
couldn't be
en Afrique n'a
multifactorial
pas,
issues which
n'a
could
pas
lead
été
to the
pire
fact
qu'elle
that
ne
the
devrait
situation in
être.
Africa
Donc, si je
has
dois
not been
répondre
as
très
bad as
rapidement
was
à la
expected. So if I
question,
have to respond very quickly to the question,
je trouve que c'est un problème sur lequel on peut venir surtout,
notice
revenir
that
surtout
it is an
cette
issue
politisation
which we could always
culturelle parce
come
que
back to, this
je
politicizing of the
pense que le
situation,
fait qu'il y ait une
because I
médecine
believe
traditionnelle
that the
ne
fact
doit
that
pas nous
traditional
empêcher de faire la
medicine
recherche
should
parce que nous rendons
traditional
service
medicine should not prevent us
même
from
à la
carrying
médecine
out
traditionnelle
research,
en la soumettant
because
à certaines analyses.
even with traditional
Je vais finir
medicine, it can be
ma
subject to some
présentation en
analysis.
répondant
So
enfin
let
à
me
la
end
question.
my
Est-ce que
presentation
la
by responding to
bioéthique
the question: can
peut
bioethics
servir de solution? Je ne
serve
crois
as a
pas.
solution?
Pourquoi?
I don't think
Parce
so.
que d'abord,
Why?
la pandémie
Because
est
first
un
of all,
phénomène
the pandemic is a phenomenon
systémique.
which is
C'est un phénomène à la fois
in other
politique,
words,
social,
at times it is
éducationnel,
social,
et tous
at
les
times it is
systèmes sociaux
political, it
étaient
is
touchés.
educational, and all
Certes, le
social
système fondamental, c'est le
facets
système de
were
santé,
affected.
mais les
So the
réponses
first of them
politiques
was
et
the
autres
health
ont
but
été
political solutions
aussi,
and
à
others
mon avis,
were
importantes
also
et on ne peut pas,
integrated
la
and were
bioéthique
also
à elle seule comme
important.
discours ne pas répondre
So,
à la question.
Bioethics
Voilà. Merci
as a
de
whole
votre
is
attention.
not sufficient. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Professor SOSOE.
Yeah.
I would like to urge all panelists to try and stick to 10 minutes, and that will give us more time at the end to discuss so that people can ask you relevant questions, for which I'm sure you have the answers. I'll move on now to the next speaker, the next panelist, who's Professor Pierre EFFA, President of the Pan-African Congress of Ethics and Bioethics. Professor, you are the coordinator under the aegis of the African Union of the Ethics and Bioethics Program for the African continent. The global health emergency induced by COVID-19 pandemic has shaken up fundamental ethical principles in research, including how to use the placebo for drug evaluation. Should we develop principles applicable in emergency situations? How does the AU intend to support member countries in overcoming the obstacles linked to scrupulous respect for universally recognized ethical principles? You have 8 to 10 minutes, please.
Okay.
Professor EFFA.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Professor Toumani.
Can you unmute?
CORRAH. Is it okay? Do you hear me?
We can't hear you.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Well, I can't.
Do you hear me?
Yes. Yes.
May I go on?
Yeah.
May I go on?
Yes, you can go on.
Is it okay?
Yes.
Professor Lukas.
Yes, okay.
We hear you.
Professor Souleymane, do you
Yes,
hear
we
me?
hear you. Yes, very well.
May I go on?
Yes, please go on. Please go on. We hear you very well.
All right.
Yeah.
Donc, permettez-moi de m'exprimer en français. Je dois d'abord,
First of all,
très sincèrement remercier
I would very sincerely like to thank Professor Awa, President of the Scientific Committee, Madam Minister of State. I thank you very much. Kindly extend my sincere gratitude to your entire team and to all those who took part in the organization of this forum. I would want to insist on the fact that it is very encouraging for stakeholders of bioethics, because a major African forum is included in the discussions of bioethics. It is indeed important for health and the challenges of Africa in the face of the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic. The question that was put to me, the professor indeed prepared the groundwork. When he made his introduction, he talked about bioethics, origin, the historical aspects, the strategic dimension. And so I'll go straight to the point with regard to questioning the principles or adapting them to the emergency situation. I would first of all say that I would not recommend this to the African leaders, the African hierarchy, and I'll explain in a short while why. we have to give the right information to the regional leaders and the political leaders and the leaders of the African Union. So I coordinate a group of scientists, and we would not recommend that in regard to the African continent. Because first of all, at the level of discussions, world discussions, such a discussion has already taken place and the discussions have come to a close. Ethics is based on solid and simple principles. There was this attempt, because bioethics is ethics which has been institutionalized. I was saying that it's not a simple discussion, it is not a philosophical discussion, because there are strategic stakes involved. So, as I said, this discussion has come to an end. We cannot have principles with variable geometrics. So, naturally, to be practical, the matter should be dealt with within ethics committees, and they should be dealt with in particular cases, and then the deontology must be respected, and they should use the appropriate tools to deal with emergency situations. So we shouldn't touch the principles. This may lead us to a situation where for a long time, people have been talking about accessibility of treatment, access to treatment. So they want some people to have access to treatment and for others not to have. We know that the international community has developed what we call civilization tools with a bit to deal with this problem. And so there's a need for human solidarity at the global level. And we have the necessary tools like the World Fund and all the other donors which were established to deal with the problems faced by humanity over the past 30 to 50 years. Now, we shouldn't therefore touch the principles. We should see cultural adaptation on a case-by-case basis as regards the appropriate solution to be found. And if we go to the principles, if we go to touch the principles in Africa, we run the risk of getting into a dangerous alley. We have watched on TV and seen and heard lots of things in the international press, and where it was believed that the situation in Africa would be catastrophic and that it would not be controllable. We know where these things begin, but we don't know where they will end. We cannot hear the speaker completely. So since the colonial period, Africa has always been considered as the guinea pig at the international level. So the time has come for all of this to come to an end. As far as I'm concerned, the African Union should work in this area. So I want to explain to you about this group which I coordinate. It is a Pan-African group It concerns bioethics, and it was established by the Assembly of Heads of State and Government, and it is to ensure the historical continuity, and it falls within the purview of the African Renaissance movements. And through this movement, the African Union tries to promote bioethics. That is why it has been institutionalized. And it has been institutionalized, of course, through this forum, which we are having here right now. So the institution is an African Union institution, and especially it works towards the strategic development of the African Development Plan, which falls within the framework of the Agenda 63 of the African Union. And this agenda was adopted during the 50th anniversary of the independence of African countries in 2013. But the tool and the inter-African tool came out during the Johannesburg Summit, that's the Assembly of Heads of State and Government in 2015. And in conformity with the program, Africa is supposed to be endowed with ethics and the necessary tools, and it behoves on a continental task force to set this up. In the field of health, we talk about an African task force, which will comprise a discussion phase, first of all, in the field of research. And this tool is referred to as the African International Conference on biomedical sciences. And it is also where Africa and its partners will discuss, its partners from other continents. Another tool is discussions for development purposes with universities,
le réseau de la cohorte qui, elle, a pour mission
the network that has for mandate and to monitor and evaluate as a network, because the COPAB organization is an institution that goes from the top to the very bottom of the pyramid, meaning from the population to the state in the regions. There will therefore be a certain monitoring with an African card to coordinate it. There is what we can call the pharmaceutical industry coordination with the coordination of the traditional therapeutic coordination. And there is an ethic evaluation certification linked to what we call the regulation agency. So this is what was put into place within the framework of the reform to be able to implement the Agenda 2063 of the African Union. The whole of Africa should be emerging with a certain degree of the speaker sound is really bad, and we believe and I hope that we'll be able to put into place the United States of Africa, and that will have a area and an exchange, a free trade area. The speaker screen has just froze. The interpreter cannot hear him.
Professor EFFA, can you hear me?
Yes.
Souleymane, can you hear him?
It's okay by my side.
Okay.
Yeah, now again, yes.
Okay.
He stopped, but I can hear him again. Please go ahead.
I can't hear him at all.
Me too.
Professeur Souleymane MBOUP.
Oui.
De mon côté, j'ai terminé.
I have finished my speech, so I'm waiting for
D'accord, on ne vous
some
a pas
questions if you have
entendu
any.
sur la
Yes, we
dernière partie.
didn't
Vous pouvez
hear
reprendre un
your
tout
last
petit
part.
peu.
Would you be
Les
able
conclusions,
to
voilà.
talk about your last part, please? What is done
Voilà.
within the African Union, and
D'accord.
what is planned, really? The African Union, since the COPA is part of it, since 2013, with the 20th conference of the African Union, the 25th of January in Addis Ababa, the mandate was given to COPA so that it would become the partner of the African Union Commission in its expertise area of bioethics and ethics. And from this mandate, COPA started its activity, deployed its activity in the implementation and the functioning. There are some cuts with the speaker's microphone. To try and integrate the whole African continent. This ethical space works on the operational side in everything that works with health. This task force has a wide array of tools that works like a web, and especially on the ground. The speaker's microphone is cutting up. There has been a conference in an African capital during the African Week for Ethics. The African Weeks for Ethics is the forum for bioethics and ethics. It was decided by leaders, African leaders at the Malabo in Guinea Equatorial in June 2014. And it is within this framework that the African Week of Bioethics, and during this week there has been a lot of conferences on consultation of health researchers. African, of course, it's been an inclusive dialogue with all stakeholders, and another
Oui.
tool.
Voilà, mais on vous entend. Allez-y.
My internet connection is really low, I'm sorry. So another tool that's very important that we've started with the partnership that we concluded on an international level, such as with well-renowned universities. We have a partnership with the University of Athens, with a university in India, a university in Oslo that has a department of bioethics, and the International Academy of Ethics, Medicine, and Public Policies of the University of Paris Descartes in France. And it is with them that we will put into place the COPAB school. Also, we have been setting up the African cohort, that are participating in research and clinical trials. We absolutely need a monitoring on the ground. So it is in a way a mapping by country, by diseases, and so on and so forth that will be set up, and the data will feed into the Bioethic African Observatory. That should be the portal when it comes to ethical research. There is also coordination, the coordination that we do with what is already existing. We have organized ourselves with pharmaceutical industry organization, and there is a coordination that we do so that we all follow the same direction, and there are fruitful exchanges. We also want to go for the implementation for traditional medicine with traditional therapists to resolve problems that the professor has already mentioned, but also the question.
Okay, can he round up now, please?
And finally, there is the certification in ethical evaluation that we would like to set up and implement with the regulatory agency, with a synergy of our efforts to avoid or to boost, first of all, our continent when it comes to research. And you know that research here is not enough developed. We have quite recent testimonies on the subject, so we need to boost research on our continent.
Can I suggest we end this here now, and the opportunity for him to say more during the question.
Yes.
Est-ce que ça c'est bon maintenant? Il faut que j'ajoute.
Oui, merci, c'est bon. Yes, please.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much, Pierre. And first of all, I'm really sorry for the technical difficulties you encountered during your expose. And I'll move on to Professor Mohamed. Hello. Thank you very much. I now move on to the next panelist, Professor Mohamed Souma, Head of the Department of Forensic Medicine and Occupational Medicine. He's also a certified expert for the National Council for Organ Donation and Transplantation. Professor Souma, you work in one of the largest university hospitals in Senegal and are responsible for the legal medicine and other services, placing you at the heart of the response. What ethical lessons can we learn from the management of the COVID-19 pandemic? You have 8 minutes, please. Sorry about that.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to the Professor CORRAH. I hope that you can hear me well. So first of all, I would like to thank the Professor Eva Maricolsek and her whole staff, as well as the scientific committee. And I would like to say hi to my master, the Professor MBOUP. I have the opportunity to talk about the ethical side of this pandemic. I will try to share with you my experience through this PowerPoint. So first of all, I'd like to say that this pandemic has changed. Is it working? Yes. So this pandemic has changed our perception of healthcare. Hospitals were used to material claims, but also working conditions that were unacceptable sometimes for a union. Of course, I would not like to take away from the whole work that is already done, but what that was the focus of healthcare workers at the time. But now we are facing a situation where the subject is clear. It's a deadly virus, whatever the mortality rate. And so we started to rethinking of what it meant to cure people. And when you face yourself in such situation, whatever your status, whatever the field you're working at, whatever your pre-existing conditions, whether you have asthma, for example, or health, you are asked to be to put yourself in danger. You know, you have to go towards the other. And I want to take the example of a colleague that in March was absent for 2-3 weeks, and I asked him what happened, and he said, well, I have pre-existing conditions, I have diabetes, I'm really sorry, dear colleagues, I cannot come. But that's our job, though. Whatever the danger that we face, we have to cure patients. We have to work with our patients, and we have to be able to help them. And I think that this pandemic has bring something fundamental, which is the uncertainty. Up until this morning, actually, we are having contradictory information. You can wear a mask for only 4 hours. No, you can wear it for the whole day. How can we talk about something we do not really master? And there is a certain uncertainty, and despite the uncertainty, we had to make decision, we had to explain, and we had to communicate. This uncertainty was first linked to the disease, its symptoms, from the asymptomatic form to the flu symptoms to acute respiratory distress. This uncertainty was also linked to the prognostic, quite benign to really, really severe, where in a few hours, if there is no reanimation, you can lose your patient. The interpreter cannot hear the speaker. Yes, so there was also an uncertainty on the therapeutic side. During the treatment, we had all the possible protocol for COVID positive patient. I was talking to a patient yesterday, and she said that I feel cured today, but am I not in danger during this second wave? And despite the uncertainty, we had to make a decision, and this is why there were a lot of political actions and sanitary actions. Of course, with all these, there were some ethical tensions for the healthcare workers, the fact that there was not enough PPEs and other equipment. We were all afraid to face patients. And it's funny because usually every day we face more dangerous diseases, you know. And there were also the fact that we've had this media frenzy with intox, and sometimes we've had as well. I would not like to talk about one European channel, but sometimes we have, you know, 24 hours news, and this feeds into anxiety, general anxiety. Everybody believes they're an expert, and sometimes they do not think before speaking, and so they do not use scientific caution. What is true today may not be true tomorrow, and every hope that is given through the media becomes a scientific truth. And amongst this, what is the place of the citizen? So first of all, he heard about of contact patients, suspect citizen. When it comes to the availability of tests as well, it was a problem. It was insufficient in most African countries when it comes to objective and subjective criteria. They were to be taken into account because some people were selling tests, and that would allow, according to your social class, to have access to something better or not. And so, for the citizen, we've applied public health recommendation, but we've already created a certain isolation in a way that led to social vulnerability. We know the situation of African citizens that live on a day-to-day basis, that first of all, with the isolation, cannot go and make ends meet, so it leads to social vulnerability. There is also a health vulnerability, because since there were not enough reanimation bed, he was in danger, but also what was really threatening us was a dehumanization, but also a non-respect of fundamental rights. After that, we have the treated patient, those that were positive. We have put a lot of means in the different countries to help asymptomatic patients, without any symptom. It's a pandemic, so usually they were hospitalized, and of course their freedom was restricted. Most of the time, states have used decrees and laws to do so and to restrict freedom. And in this restriction of freedom, and especially in the treatment of patients, sometimes we've had in the conception of treatment center a huge freedom restriction. If you put a patient that has no symptom, and you put him in a 20 square meter rooms, and for 15 days they cannot go out, it's really bad. I have a patient, for example, that doesn't call me a doctor anymore, but calls me attorney general, because they say that I've put them in a treatment center for 15 days when I was talking to him every day, you know? And also on this justice side and equity side, there were sometimes an inequality of resources, and some people would not have the same chances of others. We also had the non-consensual procedures with different insurance. Another problem was the information of patients. He wasn't able to say anything when he was being hospitalized, but when we were monitoring him, sometimes it was difficult for us to explain to him. Other big thing is that the COVID has really shaken the medical tradition. Confidentiality and professional secret is, of course, a pillar of medicine. Confidentiality, with a lot of information that were shared on the public place. Something that we need to work towards is that the COVID data remain confidential. There are many personal data that are in structures, in treatment centers, in diagnostic center, and we have to ensure that there will not be any transmission. We also need to determine people that have access to the information system, and I think that this is more for the post-COVID period, and to declare the data that cannot be shared, and to monitor their supervision. When it comes to medical secret, I think that we were actually so scared. I remember some head of services saying, "Oh, one of my interns was tested positive. Why didn't you tell me?" And I was quite shocked because I told him, "I'm so sorry, it's a medical secret, but I'll take all the dispositions so that there will be no contamination, no contagion." And I told him as well, today, as the head of the service, if you're positive in COVID, who do I call? The Minister of Health? So it's to say that when it comes to medical secret, nothing was implemented anymore because of the fear that people were feeling. It was all over, HIV all over, you know? And this sense of mortality, death was omnipresent, whether of someone close or relative, or the death of the society. And there is a vacuum in a way. It is true that the authorities are regulating the administrative side, but how is the body taken care of until the funerals and so on and so forth? And even if we say, and we've heard it so many times, we are at war, even when we are at war, we need to have for this society to take care of its death and its dead, and to be able to face the different cultural realities and religious realities. We started with restriction, and we've had in our hospital people coming to complain about it and even rioting in a way. And I believe that the loosening of the measures to lead to non-contamination by still respecting the cultural and religious rule of a society has led us to manage it. However, there is another aspect that I haven't mentioned here, is the aspect that we are coming to is vaccine. There will be an ethical problem when it comes to vaccine in African country, of course. I want to say that this is a message of hope regardless. We are having really good numbers in Africa. Everyone will have their own interpretation, of course. However, this pandemic reminds us that brings us to think about our relation with our own humanity. And I think that COVID-19 should change our approach to life. Thank you for your attention.
You are on mute. Toumani, you are on mute.
Thank you very much, Professor, for those real life experiences. I now hand over the chairmanship to Professor Souleymane MBOUP. Souleymane.
Merci, Toumani. Rebonjour.
Good morning
à tous.
Again to you all.
Dans cette session importante,
in this very important session on research in COVID-19, on COVID-19, I would like to first thank the Professor Awamarical SEC and the organizer of such an interesting conference. Even though the conference in person are missed, dearly missed, we were charmed by the quality of the organization of this particular conference, and I would like to recognize this, acknowledge it, and thank everyone that is behind this organization, because us as panel members and chairs, we feel the efforts and work that has been done to make of this conference a quality conference. And therefore, I would like to thank everyone. Now, when it comes to the COVID-19 research, it has been absolutely revolutionary. I think that, in my opinion anyways, we have never seen such a rapid experience of research development against a disease such as COVID-19. Just sometimes after the first cases, we were able to know the etiology, the virus And quite quickly, we were able to
quelque chose de
sequence
fondamentalement
it.
important, c'est de l'avoir
And something
partagé
that's very
de manière
important
à
is
ce
that it
que
was
cela
shared
permette rapidement de
internationally, so
mettre
that
au point
rapidly we were
des
able to
moyens
set up
surtout de diagnostic rapide. Ça, c'est
diagnostic
vraiment
means
extraordinaire. On n'a jamais vu un
and
développement aussi
diagnostic
rapide
tests. We've never
pour
seen such a rapid
découvrir un
development
nouvel
to be
agent,
able to
le
discover
séquencer,
a
le
new
partager et
agent,
trouver justement
sequence it,
surtout
and
des moyens
share
de
it.
diagnostic. Donc, sur ce plan, je crois que la
And
recherche
therefore,
a
I think that
énormément
on
avancé.
this very level,
On a
research has
également
made
d'autres
leaps and
avancées
bounds.
sur le
We've
plan,
also seen
même
other
si ce n'est pas toujours
improvements,
avec les succès escomptés, de la recherche
even though
de
it's not with
médicaments.
the
On a
success that we
essayé des
hoped
essais
in
cliniques
drugs research. We've
importants qui ont
tried
donné
clinical
des
trials,
résultats.
important clinical
Peut-être
trials
pas
that
toujours à la hauteur
lead
de ce qu'on
to some
espérait.
results. Not,
Donc,
of
il y a
course,
eu
what we
également des
expected at
avancées
first, but
importantes
still. So there have been
concernant
some improvements
la recherche immunologique.
regarding
Donc, on a
immunology.
rapidement mieux compris cette recherche
We
immunologique.
were able
Et
to
ceci
better
a permis
understand
très
this type of
rapidement
research, and
aussi
it allowed us quite
d'avancer
quickly, once
et en
again, to be
moins d'une
able
année
to
de
move
trouver des
forward,
vaccins.
and in
Et je
less
crois
than a
que
year to
la
find
recherche a
vaccines.
été
And I think that research
extraordinaire pour
was once
permettre
again
pour une maladie
extraordinary
de très rapidement,
to
alors que
for
d'autres
a
maladies comme le
disease to find
VIH,
a vaccine
depuis
that
plus de
quickly.
30 ans,
And
on
you
est
know that
encore
for
à la recherche
HIV,
de
we've been
vaccins. Et
looking
là,
for
en
a
moins d'une
vaccine for
année,
over
on
30
a des
years. And
vaccins qui
here,
commencent à
for
être
less
utilisés.
than a year, we were able to
Donc, la
find
recherche
vaccines that
a
have
vraiment
started being
particulièrement
used
évolué en ce qui
already. So
concerne le
research has
COVID-19.
quite evolved
Il y a eu d'autres
in the
recherches
case
qui ont eu moins de
of
succès, mais
COVID-19.
qui sont
Other
fondamentales.
research
C'est
had
les
less
recherches
success, but
également
were still
épidémiologiques.
fundamental.
Et en
And it is
particulier
about
les
epidemiology
modélisations. Il y a eu beaucoup d'essais de
and
modélisation
modelization.
qui
There were
n'ont
a
pas
lot
toujours
of
été, disons,
trials
donné les résultats qui sont
and
escomptés, mais
modeling
qui sont
that did not
importants.
once again give us the
Des recherches
result that
aussi
we were
importantes, c'est des
expecting, but
recherches
still other
comportementales et socio-anthropologiques. Ça, je crois que ça a été
socio-anthropologic
quand
and
même
behavioral research
un atout
were carried out,
important
and I
pour
think that
les
that was an
mesures qui ont été
asset
prises. Donc,
for
la
the
recherche a
measures
fait
that were
des avancées
taken.
extraordinaires.
Research has
En
made
matière de
quite
recherche
an
également, il y a la
improvement,
situation de
and
l'Afrique
we've also seen
avec
the situation of
justement une
Africa
proportion de 3 à 4% et des
with a
cas de
proportion
COVID
of
dans le
3 to
monde et des
4%
décès. Et ça, on
of
n'a pas
cases in
toujours
COVID-19 in
l'explication.
the whole
Il y a eu
world, and
quelques
also the
avancées,
death.
notamment
There was
l'âge de
no
la population
explanation really,
africaine,
maybe
notamment
the age of
l'immunité
the
de la
African
population
population,
africaine,
the
notamment
immunity
les
of the
types de
African
virus.
population,
Mais un
meaning the
facteur qui m'a
type of
paru
viruses
important,
that
c'est
we are already
l'expérience.
in contact of. But I
L'Afrique
think
a
that
vu
what is
venir
very
COVID
important is the
et a
experience.
su
We've seen
tirer
COVID coming,
un exemple
and
des
we were able
expériences
to
qui étaient
take
des autres
to
pays et
learn
a su
lessons
mettre
of
en
the
place des
experience
plans
of
de
other
contingence.
countries,
Et
and
je
we were
crois que
able
c'est
to put into place
multifactoriel,
contingency plans.
mais il reste important, surtout pour nous,
I think it's
Africains, de comprendre pourquoi cette
multi-factorial, but it is
situation et
important
qu'est-ce
for us
qu'on peut en
Africans to
attendre.
understand the situation
Donc
and what we can
voilà
learn from
des
it.
questions qui, je pense, vont
So
revenir
these are
dans cette
questions
thématique sur
that
la
will
recherche.
come back in this theme on
Je
research.
pense que le professeur
I think
Salim
that
n'est pas présent,
Professor
si je ne
Salim
me trompe.
isn't here, if
Donc,
I'm
je
not
vais donner
mistaken.
la parole au docteur
I'll give the
Farba
floor to Dr. Farba.
Merci, professeur.
Voilà, il faudrait que je puisse vous
Thank
poser
you,
une
Professor.
question.
Now, let me start by asking you a
votre
question which will serve as a guide
intervention.
for you.
Je rappelle que vous êtes le
I would
coordinateur
like
des
to
recherches
recall
cliniques
that the
à l'Institut
coordinator of the
Pasteur de
research
Dakar.
clinic in Institut Pasteur in Dakar.
Vous avez une connaissance de l'environnement des essais
You
cliniques
have
en
a
Afrique,
knowledge of the
particulièrement au
environment,
Sénégal,
clinical
mais
trials
également dans d'autres
in Africa,
continents.
particularly in
Quelles
Senegal,
sont les
as well as in other
spécificités de l'Afrique?
continents. What's
Pouvez-vous
Africa's
partager avec nous
specificity? How
votre
can you
expérience
share
au
it
Sénégal
with us? Share your
au cours de
experience in
la
Senegal
pandémie
with us
COVID-19.
during this
Vous avez 10 minutes pour
COVID-19
développer.
pandemic. You have 10 minutes. Thank you, Professor. It is indeed a privilege and honor to be here with you, as well as other members of the panel. I'd like to say good morning to all those who are listening to us and who are watching us, as well as Professor Mekuse, as well as the scientific committee who gave us this opportunity to contribute to the success of this major event. Now, let me share the presentation. Can you see my screen? Can you see my screen? Not yet? Okay, I'll try to share the screen with you. Fine.
C'est bon, on voit l'écran.
Yes, we can now see your screen. Talking about COVID-19 and the experience, the African experience, I know that each one of us is working very hard to ensure that we come up with the appropriate treatment and vaccine to overcome this infection. Africa represents 2.3% of the infections, and this makes the African continent the least affected. You can see it's blue underneath. The blue color underneath represents Africa. Africa also represents 2.3% of the number of deaths, as you can see. Africa's share in COVID research. Africa represents 2.6% of research in the field of research area, 4.5% in research, and 8.2% in matters relating to the search for a vaccine. You'll notice that Africa was indeed prepared to carry out high clinical trials. And AFRIVAC was initiated in 2010 and has been tried in many African countries. The Ebola vaccine also of Johnson & Johnson and Merck was tested in Africa, and it helped to bring to an end the epidemic in the Democratic Republic of Congo. In fact, I even supervised this clinical trials phase 2 in West Africa. There are also other initiatives such as CONVAT, the antibodies coordinated by Antikov, and solidarity trials of the WHO. We'll get into the details later. CONVAT is a consortium which brings together several organizations which work in Africa. And this consortium aims at building capacities and opening sites where clinical trials, high-level clinical trials could be conducted. And the red points you see on the map are the sites which have already been established, these high-level sites, and the black spots you see are sites which will be brought up to be able to deal with high-level clinical trials. There's an antibody consortium coordinated by DNDi in Geneva, Switzerland, and it also brings together several organizations which are currently working in Africa. This project has an objective to test several different treatments in Africa, and I believe that up till now it remains the greatest study which we have so far. You can see the different institutes where these clinical trials will take place, as you can see on the map of Africa there. We also have solidarity trials of the WHO. We know that South Africa also participated in this. And on this screen, you can see the 250 research sites which have accepted to take part in these vaccination trials. And as you can see, there are some 20 African countries, as you can see on the map, which have indeed proposed that they would be willing to participate. I too proposed a candidate on behalf of Senegal for a Senegalese site, and I hope that this site will be chosen to participate. Meanwhile, there are weaknesses. The management system, the quality management system, which is indeed low in African research centers. Currently, I'm involved in a major project that was funded by the European Union, and it is and Innovatrice in Geneva. It is aimed at building capacities in 20 African countries, and in particular, set up a management system for quality. And there has been lots of contributions which have indeed helped also in the fight against this COVID-19 and other illnesses. Now, we talked about ethics at the beginning of this session, and I believe that ethics is a topic which, after, during, and before, remains a very important theme in this area. And the difference at the level of the different African countries in terms of the weak points, when we look at the European Union, which is a group of 27 countries, they discuss and they agree to harmonize their trials. But beyond that, they work in conjunction with the United States and Canada and Switzerland to set up the best clinical trials, good, proper clinical trials. Now, in Africa, we have 54 countries. And when we notice that the African countries, if African countries could follow the same approach, it would be a good thing. So the creation of the African Agency and CDC Africa, African Agency for Medicine and CDC Africa, indeed a step in the right direction, and I hope that this would develop. But I think for now, in each region, there's a ECOWAS region which concerns us. As a matter of fact, at the level of this region, we could try to see how we could harmonize these clinics while hoping that this harmonization could be extended to the entire continent. Harmonization will create more opportunities and will encourage research, production, or drug production at the local level, and vaccines. Senegal is currently testing an anticoagulant in the hospital in Dakar, which I coordinate together with other countries in the world. This includes the United States, Japan, Germany, Denmark, and Israel. But I would just like to talk about the areas for improvement. We've noted that with regard to local rules and protocols, the Ethics Committee meets every month in presence physically, and with regard to the COVID pandemic, it is an emergency situation, and just as we're doing right now in this forum, this video conference, I think members could adopt the same method during sessions, during their weekly sessions, so that they could meet even twice a week or even once a week, so as to accelerate consideration and regulatory issues concerning the different projects that are submitted to the committee. So there are projects which are submitted to the committee, and they are very interesting, and they could be dealt with through virtual sessions, online sessions. Doctor, you have 2 more minutes. There's also the problem of agreement. We noted that there are some patients who are hospitalized and who are tired. So when you give them a form to fill and sign, it becomes very difficult. So it is our hope that the Ethics Committee could think about this and think of electronic signing, for instance, when it comes to these COVID situations. And we notice that the site is overloaded, and there's not much time to deal with the trials. So dealing with the equipment too could indeed constitute a problem. Another problem is validating the system of electronic data, and we're forced to use paper. So a lot of time is wasted and many people are employed to deal with the data. This is another problem. There's also problems at the level of the pharmacies, which are not well equipped and which are not well secured. So even at the level of laboratories, there could be problems, but there's a lot of laxity and delay in setting up the tool which could help us carry out this study. But I've noticed that there are many services which are involved. The cardiology, for instance, medical services, lab tests, so reanimation too. And what we have noted is that most of this personnel have not been trained to do what they are doing, but they come up with data which is used in this study, and the consequence is, you can see this diapo, this is the result of interpretation of a scanner which is used in the exercise and which is not legible. And this is not a good document, as you can see, and it is not easy for us, because when you are part of this site, you cannot carry out training with this sort of information. So we have another member who will also have to take the floor, and thank you very much. I have come to an end, and thank you very much.
Merci pour cette excellente présentation.
Thank you for this excellent presentation on your experience, but it highlights the difficulties of carrying out clinical trials in Africa. So perhaps we'll come back at the level of questions and answers. So now we'll introduce our last speaker for this.
Professor Salim Abdool Karim.
He's
Welcome,
Salim Abdool Karim.
So Professor Salim Abdool Karim is the director of the Center for AIDS Program of Research in South Africa, CAPRISA, wonderful institutions, and is based in South Africa. So Professor Salim Abdool Karim, you are among the most recognized experts in Africa in AIDS research, and in the name of the absolute guiding principle of research, respect for human dignity, but also for justice and equality, the condition for carrying out trials must be same everywhere. What opportunities and obstacles exist for Africa? You have 8 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chair. It's a great pleasure and an honor to be here with you today. I hope I will be able to address the question you're raising as follows. So when we look at Africa, we experience epidemics on a regular basis. Look at this map. We have many epidemics during 2016 and 2018. So we are in a position to make an important contribution, and especially when you look at COVID-19 in Africa, you can see the opportunities for research. So I'm just going to skip to, just in the interest of time, that when we look at the capabilities in Africa to do research, and if we look at these countries that have been shaded in various colors of blue and purple, you get some idea of the nature and the capacity we have. And across the board, when you're looking at all of these different trials in the graph that I've provided you, it gives you some notion that Africa is not simply a consumer of information and clinical trial evidence. We are also important generators. So if you take, for example, in HIV, you can see in the red bar the number of vaccine trials being done in Africa on HIV. Similarly with malaria. And you can see that in malaria, we also have vaccines for animal reservoirs. So the level of capacity, the opportunities that exist are very substantial. How did we exploit this? How do we use this capacity? Well, the African CDC was mandated by the African Union to create the Africa CDC Consortium for COVID-19 vaccine clinical trials called CONVACT. And this was established really to bring together research capabilities in Africa to address the issue of COVID-19 and to do vaccine trials in particular. And when we look at the current results from these vaccine trials, these are the 4 trials that have already published their results. We get some idea that we can make a vaccine that's been shown now consistently, and we can make a highly efficacious vaccine. So it's really good news on that front. And that good news needs to be tempered with what we don't yet know from these trials. We don't know the full results of most of them. Just the first of these peer-reviewed articles are coming out. The study endpoints are not clear. Whether the vaccine protects against both mild disease and severe disease is not known. And then, of course, come the programmatic issues of scale-up and so on. So there's a lot more we need to learn. And we have several more vaccine trials coming through the pipeline. And I'll just end off on the note that Africa has a track record of developing and testing vaccines. Right now, we are testing several vaccines across the continent, including several COVID-19 vaccines. Not only are we testing vaccines, we've also made vaccines. If in the field of HIV, for example, our team created the CAPRISA 256 antibody as a precursor to a vaccine trial that's currently in clinical trials in South Africa. So we have a track record to be able to do this. And what we need is we need the strong stakeholder buy-in to be able to do these studies. Because as we look at what we're going to need to achieve, we're going to need to achieve a safe and efficacious vaccine that's cost-effective, easy to store, and has minimal doses for us to reach herd immunity, regardless of which condition we are discussing. And then I'll end off with that it's one thing to do the research, we also have to start planning for the access, manufacture, distribution, implementation. So I'll just end off on the note that Africa is already contributing significantly to COVID-19 treatment and vaccine research through multiple partnerships. We have a proficient track record in conducting vaccine research and development, and Africa's people, scientists, and government are ready to contribute more. And we can do so in a manner that meets all of the ethical standards and involves the community in ways that will ensure that we leave behind an empowered community. Thank you very much, Chair.
Merci, Professeur Salim, pour cette contribution qui, comme d'habitude, nous éclaire énormément.
Thank you very much,
merci aussi d'avoir
Salim. You have made a worthy
nous avons 10 minutes encore pour la session, pour la
discussion. We
discussion.
still have 10
Je n'ai pas
minutes
reçu
for
beaucoup de
discussion.
questions. Une
I've not
question
received very many
concerne
questions. There's a question
l'immunité
concerning
collective en Afrique.
Collective immunity in
Et
Africa.
les participants peuvent également prendre la parole
could
ou envoyer juste des messages par rapport à des questions. Je voudrais répondre à cette question, mais laisser aussi
I would like to respond to this question,
professeur Salim
but I would
donner son
also allow
impression.
Professor Salim to give his
Selon
impression.
notre expérience,
From our
il
experience,
existe effectivement une
there is
immunité collective, en tout
indeed
cas au
collective
Sénégal, parce
immunity,
que
at
nous
least in
avons
Senegal,
réalisé des
because
enquêtes
we have been able to
et ces enquêtes
conduct
ont montré
inquiries
des taux
which have
variables
revealed
selon les populations, mais qui
variable
dans certaines
rates amongst the
populations,
population, but among
d'anticorps
some
qui peuvent
segments
aller
of the
jusqu'à
population,
40%.
there are
Donc le
some
virus a
which could go
circulé
to up
à
to
un moment,
40%.
mais n'a pas
So,
permis justement
it's circulated for some time, but it didn't make it possible to provide total protection. Because when we talk of total immunity, we expect it to get to 60 or 80%, but that has never been attained. So, for this second wave in Africa, perhaps we can understand that even if there was immunity, it is insufficient, but it is also important in the fabrication of vaccine, as Professor Salim is going to confirm. We have to make recourse to vaccines, which would indeed have that propensity to protect the population when it comes to collective. Now, there's something concerning the second wave in Africa.
Regarding the herd immunity in Africa, what do you think? And also the second wave of HIV in different countries in Africa, if you can explain. Les autres panélistes peuvent aussi répondre.
Other members of the panel could indeed take the floor also to express their views. But if participants have questions, you should feel free to ask. Professor Salim.
Thank you very much, Professor MBOUP. Indeed, what you've asked is a critically important question. And there have been purveyors of the notion that the way in which we should try to control this disease is to just let natural infection take us to a point of herd immunity. That is a very dangerous notion and has now been completely debunked as a strategy. The reality, however, is that when the virus spreads through the community, that the level of exposure to the virus and the available immunity to the virus is substantially higher than the cases we are aware of. And the reason for that is the very high proportion of asymptomatic infections. It's estimated that in various parts of Africa, we have antibodies present from about 8.1% to all the way up to 37%. So it varies to quite a large extent. So what is herd immunity for COVID-19? That's not a simple question. WHO says it's somewhere between 60 and 80%. I think most of us who look at the basic formula that is used will come up with somewhere between 60 and 70%. But herd immunity varies. In more dense areas, it's higher. In less dense areas, it's lower. If we're going to aim to achieve herd immunity at a level of, let's, for example, argue 60%, it is still going to mean that we're going to have to vaccinate a substantial number of people in Africa. And we will have to continue using our preventive measures of masks and social distancing and hand washing for quite a while, because it's going to take us a journey. If you just take my own country at 58 million people, to vaccinate 60% of the population, that's about 40 million. That if we had to vaccinate 1 million per month, which is not going to be easy, it's going to take us 40 months. That's over 3 years. So herd immunity is not a concept we can talk about in the short term, but it is a vision that we have to aim for over the next several years. I hope I've addressed your question, Professor MBOUP, and I think you are among the leaders in this field who've been articulating the importance of ensuring that we get a good vaccine and that we're able to roll it out timeously. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Do you have any thought regarding the second wave in Africa?
Okay, well, so it's very clear when we look at the evidence that Africa is going through a second wave. Within our own country in South Africa, the Minister of Health declared that we are in a second wave on Wednesday. And it's based on calculations we had prepared some time ago that if we reach infection rates above 5 per 100,000 population per day, we would regard that as a pathway to the second wave. So the second wave is in and about. We are already in the midst of it. And that not only applies to South Africa, it applies to several other countries. Whether we can mitigate that and whether we can blunt the second wave, I have serious doubts. If you just take in South Africa, in December, we have very large numbers of people moving around the country for vacation to the sea or to the mountains, and we will see this virus spreading like wildfire. So we are expecting the worst, and I suspect in many parts of Africa, we will see quite a severe second wave. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We have 5 minutes left. Il y a une question sur les raisons de cette seconde vague. Je laisse à tous les panélistes peut-être une minute pour pouvoir
I'll leave every member of the panel 1 minute just to give their opinion and to conclude on this second wave of the pandemic. I would like to take the floor amongst the members of the panel. I really don't have any other questions from the public.
Professor Lukas, can you have,
Professor Lukas,
some si vous avez des conclusions de dernière minute,
do you have any final conclusions and any reasons that explain the second wave of the pandemic?
Vous êtes en mode muet.
Please unmute your microphone.
Comme je ne suis pas médecin ni chercheur, je ne suis pas
I'm
dans le domaine
neither a doctor
médical.
nor a
Néanmoins, ce que je
researcher, and I'm not in a
peux dire de
medical
mon
field.
expérience, c'est que
All
les
I
gens
can say
ont
from my experience is
sous-estimé
that people
les consignes qu'il fallait
underestimated
garder et ont profité
the advice that
de
were
la baisse
given
apparente qu'il y a eu
and
pour croire que
the apparent
effectivement
reduction
le
in
virus
the
a
number of
terminé
cases
sa
of infection.
carrière. Ce
And they thought
qui
the
n'est pas le cas
infection
du
had come
tout.
to an end, but that was not the case at
Et ce qu'on
all.
vit actuellement,
So what
on
we are
aurait pu
living today,
l'éviter
what we're
aussi d'une
experiencing
certaine
today
manière,
could have been
puisque
avoided
l'intensité n'est
in
pas
one
la
way or
même
the
dans
other
tous les pays.
because the intensity is not the
Voilà,
same
merci
in
beaucoup.
all countries.
Professor Souma.
Thank you very much. Professor Souma, please, you have the floor. Yes, indeed. I would like to share the views expressed by Professor SOSOE. I think we did not really draw lessons from the first wave. We should have maintained the restrictive measures, social distancing, and all of that. It's a daily work which we have to do amongst the population because we human beings have the tendency of always giving up.
Merci.
So once more, thank you.
Dr.
Thank you,
FAYE.
Professor. Dr. FAYE. Yes, thank you, Professor. Personally, I believe that it's a little bit complicated, especially for our country. We noticed that there were religious events which brought together thousands of people, and 2 or 3 weeks later, there were consequences. There were many cases, waves of infection. But what I want to say is that during this event, people were prepared, and measures were taken, protective measures were taken, people were sensitized, and they were sensitized by religious leaders. So during this event, all measures were taken to avoid the transmission. But after these events, we noticed that for those who are in Dakar or in the countryside, they did not follow up with these restrictive measures, and they felt that the epidemic had come to an end. In my opinion, this second wave is due to the fact that people relented in respect for these restrictive measures. And I think the government took the appropriate measures, but the people relented.
Okay, so my friend Toumani, do you have any concluding remarks? And if you have any comment also to add.
Thank you very much, Souleymane. I think this world needs to open up itself to history. In 1918 and between 1918 and 1920, there was the Spanish flu. 500 million people were infected. There were 50 million deaths. And there was a second wave. Yet we didn't pay attention to what history tells us. In terms of a second wave, it's a must, it's happening. What we need to do is to go back to our people and tell them to go back to the basic measures. It's not too late. It will stop that second wave from being worse. I want to take this opportunity to thank our COLSEC, the professor, and I want to thank the organizing committee for such a magnificent organization despite all the technical issues. Congratulations to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you. So this concludes this session. Thank you. And thanking also the participants who were there since this morning and all our wonderful panelists. Thank you to everybody.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.